Hi everyone, welcome to Excel Clinic. Today we will be talking about how Excel can help you comply with the requirements of IFRS 16, the lease accounting standard. Many have requested for this, so here you go. For those applying Singapore FRS or Malaysian's FRS, the equivalent national standards are SFRS 116 and MFRS 16 respectively. We will focus on the accounting requirements for lessee today. IFRS 16 came into effect in 2019. It required lessee to recognize leases on balance sheet. Prior to IFRS 16, the old lease accounting standard IS 17 only requires leases to be recognized on balance sheet for finance leases. So now IFRS 16 applies to most leases except for those short-term and small value asset leases. I remember back then, many people asked me for a template to compute the lease liability. It is a relatively heavy requirement for most entities, especially the smaller ones. So today, we will be building the lease accounting templates. It can be complicated. Follow me, no OT. As usual, we will do a recap of the accounting requirement. In short, IFRS 16 require reporting entity to recognize its lease commitment as liability on the balance sheet. At the same time, you'll recognize an asset representing the rights to use the lease asset known as the right of use or ROU asset. The lease liability is initially measured at the present value of future lease payment. How about ROU asset? In a plain vanilla lease, it will be the same as the lease liability, but it should be adjusted for any lease payments made at or prior to the lease commencement, net of any lease incentive, initial direct costs, and provision for reinstatement. In this video, we will use an example of a plain vanilla lease without all these add-ons. Subsequent to the initial recognition, for lease liability, we have to accrue the interest at each reporting date. If you close your accounts monthly, then you will do it monthly. It will be at the implicit rate, or if it is not available, incremental borrowing rate. At each lease payment date, you will reduce the lease liability balance by the lease payment. For ROU asset, it is very similar to the requirements for property, plant and equipment under IAS 16. In fact, IFRS 16 paragraph 31 refers to the depreciation requirements in IAS 16. In short, you will amortize a portion of the balance to P&L periodically. Three things you need to do. First, compute the PV. Second, build a lease schedule. Then build a ROU asset schedule. What is the present value? If it is a higher purchase, then most likely you have the fair value of the asset. If you do not know the fair value, then you have to calculate present value of future payments using incremental borrowing rate or IBR in short. How to determine IBR? That is a question every accountant I met has. It is more of a technical accounting topic that we should save for discussions with our auditor. Let's say we have a lease of office space. We have to pay $1,000 per month over 48 months. The fair value of the lease is not available. Our IBR is 0.5% per month. The lease commenced on 31st March 2022 using the PV function of Excel equals PV. The first argument is the interest rate. The second argument is the number of periods. The third argument is the payment per period. We will skip the fourth argument. In this scenario, the first payment is made at the lease commencement, and thus the fifth argument shall be 1. This is a shortcut method to compute the present value. I talked about present value calculation and discounting in my earlier video. Watch this video to learn more about present value calculation. Step 2. We need to build a lease liability schedule. Recap of what is needed for subsequent measurement of the lease liability. We need 6 columns. Payment number, payment date, opening balance, interest, payment, and the ending balance. Fill the first columns with numbers 1 to 48. The second column is to compute the date of each payment. We will use the function eDate. This function returns the date of the same day in subsequent month equal eDate. The first argument is the lease commencement date. The second argument is the payment number minus 1. Why minus 1? If the second argument is 1, Excel will return the date 1 month later. The first payment in our scenario is due at lease commencement and not 1 month later. So the second argument for the first line item here should be 0, which is the payment number 1 minus 1. The opening balance of the first line item should be the PV we computed earlier. There will be no interest for the first payment because it is made exactly on the lease commencement. The formula for payment is minus sign, the payment per month indicated above. Press F4 to make the reference absolute so that we can copy this the rest of the rows. The ending balance will be the sum of the columns before. The formula for the first line item is slightly different because the opening has to be the PV and there is no interest charge. The second line item and onwards, the opening balance will be the ending balance of the previous period. The interest will be the opening multiplied by the incremental borrowing rate per month. Make the reference to IBR absolute by pressing F4 so that we can copy this to the rest of the row. The formula for payment and ending balance is the same as the first line. Then we copy the second line to the rest of the rows. Apply number formatting. Do one final check. Is the ending balance of the last payment 0? This is a quick check to know if you have done the calculation correctly. After making 48 payments, you should settle all liabilities. It is likely that your lease lasts more than 12 months because if it isn't, you would have opted it like a service contract and not to recognize it on balance sheet. If that is the case, when you prepare the balance sheet, you may need to segregate the current and non-current portion of the lease liability. How to do it? Is it just 12 times 1,000 for the current portion and that's it? No. If you do that, the current portion will not be carried at amortized cost, which is the requirement of the accounting standards. Watch my previous video to see how to do the segregation correctly. Step 3. The ROU asset schedule. You can watch my previous video on prepayment or amortization schedules. It can be applied to the ROU asset schedule. It is useful if you have more than one ROU asset and you want a single schedule that can give you an overview of all the ROU assets. If you only have one or for some reason you want one schedule per ROU asset, you can consider the following method. We need a couple of information in this worksheet. The initial measure of the ROU asset. In our example here, it is the same as the PV of the future lease payments as computed in step 1. Like property, plant and equipment, we need the useful life of the lease asset. Then, the lease commencement date. We need 5 columns, month number, the month end dates, opening balance, depreciation, and the ending balance. Similar to what we did for lease liability, fill the numbers 1 to 48. Then use the end of month function instead of ed. We need to record the depreciations on the last day of the month regardless of the payment date. Equal EO month. The first argument is the lease commencement date. The second argument is the month number. No -1 here as I will ignore the depreciation for March 2022. The lease started on the last day of March. The amount should not be material. But if you want to be very accurate, watch till the end of the video and I will tell you how. The depreciation amount will be the initial measure divided by the number of months. I want it to be presented in negative number. So add a minus sign in front. Make both references absolute so that we can copy them to the other rows. The ending balance will just be the sum of prior columns. From the second rows onwards, the opening balance will be the ending of the previous row. Depreciation is the same formula and so is the ending balance. Copy and paste it to the other rows. Check that ROU asset will be fully depreciated at the end of the useful life. This is a simple template for lease accounting for lessee. If you have a more complicated scenario, for example, inconsistent lease payment throughout the lease periods that doesn't coincide with calendar month, or if you need super accurate depreciations or interest accretion, or you are just not confident to do this yourself, you can use the lease template we built. Our template helps you to compute the present value, populate the lease liability schedule, and the ROU asset schedule automatically based on the lease payments you enter. There are validations to ensure that you don't miss out on any important stuff that affect the calculation. It also provides you with the journal entries to be passed. If your lease payment doesn't coincide with the calendar month, the template will also let you know the interest expense needed to be accrued. If the fair value of the lease is known, the template will also compute the implicit rate automatically. Other than this, we also offer customization solutions. Contact me to find out more. Let me know by commenting below the topic you want me to cover next. Follow me no OT. Subscribe to my channel and share this video with your fellow Excel users. Cheers.